Most people would have turned around and gone home, but Hannah Parker was not most people. The thought echoed through her mind as she stared through the rain-streaked windshield of her aging sedan parked on the side of a quiet road just outside town. The engine had stopped 10 minutes earlier with a sputter and a groan, and no matter how many times she turned the key, nothing happened. Rain hammered against the roof of the car, while the digital clock on the dashboard reminded her that every passing minute brought her closer to missing the most important job interview of her life. Hannah gripped the steering wheel and closed her eyes. She could already picture her 8-year-old son, Mason, eating breakfast at the neighbor's house before school, completely unaware that his mother's future depended on reaching an office building nearly 6 miles away. For months, she had worked 2 part-time jobs, barely sleeping, stretching every dollar until there was almost nothing left to stretch. Rent was due soon. School expenses continued to grow. The refrigerator was emptier than she wanted to admit. This interview represented more than employment. It represented stability. It represented hope. It represented the possibility of giving Mason a life that felt less uncertain. Hannah checked her phone. The battery sat at 12%. No rideshare drivers were available nearby. The bus route would not get her there in time. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel defeated. The rain seemed determined to wash away every opportunity she had worked toward. Then she took a deep breath and made a decision. She reached into the back seat, grabbed a folder containing her resume and references, slipped it carefully into a waterproof document sleeve, and stepped out into the storm. Cold rain soaked her jacket almost immediately. The wind pushed against her as she locked the car and began walking along the roadside. 6 miles felt impossible under normal circumstances. Today, wearing inexpensive shoes and carrying the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, it felt even longer. Yet she kept moving. One step, then another. The interview was scheduled for 10 o'clock. She glanced at her watch and calculated every minute. Somewhere ahead stood a chance to change her life. Giving up was not an option. Several cars passed, their tires sending sprays of water across the pavement. Most never slowed. Hannah lowered her head and continued forward. She thought about Mason's smile when he talked about becoming an engineer someday. She thought about the promises she had made to him during difficult nights when money was tight and uncertainty felt overwhelming. Those thoughts became fuel. About a mile into her journey, a black luxury SUV appeared in the distance. It slowed slightly as it approached, its dark windows reflecting the gray morning sky. For a brief moment, Hannah wondered whether someone might offer help. Instead, the vehicle continued forward. Inside, however, a pair of observant eyes remained fixed on the determined woman walking through the rain. Ethan Brooks, chief executive officer of one of the fastest-growing companies in the state, found himself unexpectedly distracted. He had meetings waiting. Investors expected updates. His schedule was planned down to the minute. Yet something about the woman carrying a document folder through a storm caught his attention. Most people would have searched for an excuse to quit. She simply kept walking. As the SUV disappeared around a curve ahead, Hannah pressed forward through the rain without realizing that someone had just witnessed the beginning of a story neither of them would ever forget. The rain showed no sign of stopping as Hannah continued along the shoulder of the road, her shoes growing heavier with every step and her jacket soaked through despite her efforts to shield herself from the wind. The interview folder remained tucked securely beneath her arm, protected inside the waterproof sleeve she had grabbed before leaving her car. That folder felt more valuable than anything else she owned. Inside were years of experience, references from former supervisors, and the hope that someone would finally see her potential instead of her circumstances. Hannah checked the time again and quickened her pace. Every minute mattered. Ahead, traffic increased as she approached the city limits. The office building where her interview would take place was still several miles away, but she refused to focus on the distance. Instead, she concentrated on reaching the next intersection, then the next block, then the next traffic light. Small goals felt easier than thinking about the entire journey. Meanwhile, several hundred yards ahead, Ethan Brooks sat quietly in the back seat of his SUV. He should have been reviewing quarterly reports. Instead, he found himself glancing repeatedly through the rear window. The woman was still walking. 20 minutes had passed since he first noticed her, yet she had not slowed down. Something about that determination stayed with him. Most people would have searched for shelter. Most people would have postponed whatever obligation waited ahead. She simply kept moving forward. Ethan finally spoke to his driver. Has she stopped at all? The driver glanced into the side mirror. Not once. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. The answer impressed him more than he expected. As the vehicle continued toward downtown, he found himself wondering where she was going and why reaching her destination seemed so important. Back on the roadside, Hannah passed a small convenience store. For a brief moment, she considered stepping inside to dry off. Then she looked at the clock again and kept walking. She could not afford the delay. Her thoughts drifted toward Mason. Earlier that morning, before the rain started, he had handed her a folded piece of paper. It now rested inside her purse. During a red light, she stopped beneath a storefront awning and pulled it out. Crayon letters filled the page. Good luck, Mom. You can do it. A small smile appeared despite her exhaustion. The simple message gave her strength. She carefully returned it to her purse and stepped back into the rain. Nearly an hour after leaving her car, Hannah finally entered the heart of the business district. Towering office buildings rose around her, their glass exteriors reflecting the gray sky. She looked down at her soaked clothing and took a nervous breath. She certainly did not look like the ideal candidate. Yet turning back was no longer an option. Unbeknownst to her, the same black SUV had arrived downtown several minutes earlier. Ethan stepped out beneath the covered entrance of his company's headquarters and glanced across the street. There she was again, wet, exhausted, and clearly struggling, yet still walking with purpose. For reasons he could not fully explain, he remained standing there watching as Hannah crossed the final intersection, completely unaware that the man observing her would soon play a far greater role in her life than either of them could possibly imagine. Hannah finally reached the small cafe where her interview was scheduled, water dripping from her hair and jacket, leaving puddles on the polished floor as she entered, taking a moment to catch her breath and shake off the cold. The receptionist greeted her with a warm smile, unaware of the journey she had just endured, and handed her a cup of steaming coffee, which Hannah held tightly, savoring the heat and comfort it offered. She scanned the room, noting the quiet hum of conversation and the soft clatter of utensils, her nerves settling slightly as she found a corner table to sit and review her notes, ensuring everything was in order for the interview. Outside, the rain continued, blanketing the street in a reflective sheen, making the city lights shimmer and dance on the wet pavement. Unseen, Ethan parked a few blocks away, watching through the cafe window, his curiosity growing as he noticed the determination on her face, the way she held herself despite being soaked and weary. Her presence stirred memories of their shared past, fleeting moments from childhood when laughter had been simpler and life less complicated, and he felt a pull to see her succeed beyond what either of them had imagined. Inside the cafe, Hannah adjusted her folder and rehearsed her introduction quietly, the words forming a rhythm that helped steady her heartbeat, blending professionalism with authenticity, aiming to convey her experience while letting her genuine self shine through. Moments passed, and a soft chime indicated the arrival of someone else, prompting her to look up, expecting the interviewer, but instead her gaze met a familiar face in the crowd. Ethan stepped into the cafe, casually at first, then more purposefully as he recognized her, the coincidence, or fate, feeling undeniable as he approached without disrupting the flow of the room, choosing timing and subtlety carefully. Hannah noticed the movement out of the corner of her eye, a brief flicker of recognition passing through her, memories surfacing of shared childhood games, summer afternoons, and promises whispered long ago, and a smile formed despite the stress of the day. Ethan offered a small nod, acknowledging her presence without words, letting her continue her focus, and she felt an odd mix of surprise, nostalgia, and encouragement, strengthening her resolve. The interview would begin shortly, yet the unplanned reunion infused the room with a quiet energy, a reminder of resilience, unexpected reconnections, and the subtle intersections of past and present. As she adjusted her posture and straightened her notes, the once daunting task ahead seemed slightly less intimidating. The warmth of human connection bridging the gap between nerves and confidence, while Ethan watched silently, a silent witness to determination and grace, knowing that this moment, small as it seemed, held the potential to reshape both of their futures in ways neither could yet fully comprehend. Hannah took a deep breath and smiled to herself as she set her coffee aside, her hands still damp from the rain, reminding her of the effort it had taken to get here. She adjusted her notes and rehearsed quietly under her breath, the sound of soft jazz playing in the background mingling with the occasional clink of a spoon against a cup. The door opened and a breeze swept through the cafe, carrying the scent of fresh bread and pastries, while outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, reflecting the city lights like tiny mirrors on the slick sidewalks. Ethan remained at a distance, leaning against the doorway, observing discreetly, taking in the sight of her focused expression, the determined way she straightened her jacket and smoothed her hair, and the subtle strength she radiated despite being soaked and tired. He remembered fragments of their past, shared laughter, and innocent moments, and a small smile tugged at his lips as he watched her resilience, realizing how much she had grown while keeping a sense of humility and grace. Inside, Hannah glanced at the clock, noting the time until her interview, and her heartbeat quickened with anticipation. She straightened in her chair, aligning her folder, checking that her resume and notes were perfectly arranged, making mental notes of the points she wanted to emphasize. A waitress passed by with a tray of warm drinks, the aroma filling the air, and Hannah nodded her thanks, focusing on the task at hand, aware that every detail could make a difference. From across the room, Ethan shifted slightly, careful not to draw attention, but curious to see how she would navigate this challenge, feeling a protective urge mixed with admiration for her perseverance. He considered the life she had built, the challenges she faced alone, and the quiet strength required to walk 6 miles in the rain just to seize an opportunity, and he was quietly moved, appreciating her commitment and courage. Hannah, unaware of the attentive observer, took a moment to compose herself, inhaling deeply and letting a calm resolve settle over her, recognizing that the effort had already demonstrated her dedication and character. As the moment of the interview approached, a sense of anticipation filled the cafe, mingling with the subtle energy of human connection, the realization that sometimes support and recognition can come from unexpected places, and Ethan, still watching silently, felt a quiet satisfaction knowing he had witnessed her unwavering determination and the first steps toward a pivotal moment that could change everything. The interviewer finally arrived and invited Hannah into a conference room overlooking the city. She rose from her chair, gathered her folder, and followed with quiet determination, refusing to let the rain, exhaustion, or uncertainty affect the opportunity she had worked so hard to reach. The room was modern and impressive, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a long polished table, but Hannah focused only on the people seated across from her. She greeted each person warmly and thanked them for their time. As the interview began, questions came quickly. They asked about her work experience, leadership style, problem-solving skills, and ability to handle pressure. Hannah answered honestly. She did not try to impress anyone with exaggerated stories or perfect rehearsed responses. Instead, she shared real examples from her years of balancing multiple jobs, managing difficult situations, and finding solutions when resources were limited. The interview panel listened carefully. One manager asked how she handled setbacks. Hannah smiled softly. I stopped expecting life to be easy a long time ago. When something goes wrong, I focus on the next step instead of the problem itself. Another interviewer asked what motivated her. Hannah thought briefly before answering. Responsibility. People depend on me. That gives me a reason to keep moving forward. Her answer carried more weight than anyone in the room realized. Meanwhile, several floors above, Ethan Brooks sat in his office reviewing the interview schedule. Through the internal system, he had already learned the name of the woman he had seen walking through the storm. Hannah Parker. Something about her continued to occupy his thoughts. Most candidates arrived discussing achievements and qualifications. She had arrived carrying evidence of character before saying a single word. Curious, Ethan requested a summary of her interview performance. 20 minutes later, he received feedback from the hiring team. The comments immediately caught his attention. Reliable, professional, genuine, exceptional under pressure. Ethan leaned back in his chair. None of the notes surprised him. He had witnessed those qualities long before she entered the building. Back in the conference room, the final question arrived. Why do you want this position? Hannah looked around the table. She could have offered a polished corporate answer. Instead, she chose the truth. Because I want stability. I want to grow professionally. I want to contribute to a company that values hard work. Most importantly, I want to build a future where my son sees that persistence matters. The room fell quiet. Her answer was simple, yet deeply authentic. When the interview concluded, the panel thanked her and promised a decision soon. Hannah shook hands, gathered her belongings, and walked back into the lobby. Relief washed over her. Regardless of the outcome, she knew she had given everything she had. As she prepared to leave the building, a receptionist approached. "Ms. Parker, there has been a small change. Someone would like to meet with you before you go." Hannah blinked in surprise. "Who?" The receptionist smiled politely. "The Chief Executive Officer." Hannah froze for a moment. She had not expected that. Across the building, Ethan stood near the window of his office, looking down at the street where the rain had finally stopped. In a few minutes, he would meet the woman whose determination had captured his attention long before he ever saw her resume, and neither of them yet understood how important that meeting would become. Hannah exited the building, adjusting her damp coat and checking her phone for messages from her son, whose voice filled her heart with warmth despite the chilly afternoon. She walked down the steps into the still wet streets, feeling a mixture of relief and anticipation. The rain had finally ceased, leaving shimmering reflections of city lights on the pavement, and the air carried the fresh scent of wet asphalt and early evening. As she approached the corner cafe, she noticed a sleek black SUV pull up, and her heart skipped a beat when the door opened. Ethan Brooks stepped out, dressed in a tailored suit that suggested confidence without arrogance, and his eyes scanned the street until they found hers. For a brief moment, the world around them seemed to pause, the bustle of pedestrians and distant traffic fading into the background. He approached with measured steps, offering a polite smile that did not hide the genuine curiosity and recognition in his gaze. "Miss Parker," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight of authority and interest. "I wanted to meet you personally after hearing about your interview and your journey here today." Hannah felt a rush of surprise and modest pride. She had not expected to encounter the CEO in person, let alone receive acknowledgment of her determination. She returned his smile with a nod, keeping her tone professional yet open. "Thank you, Mr. Brooks. I appreciate the opportunity to meet you." They stepped inside the cafe, the warmth and aroma of freshly brewed coffee creating an immediate sense of comfort, and they found a quiet corner where they could talk without interruption. As they settled into their chairs, Ethan's demeanor shifted slightly, becoming more conversational, allowing a glimpse of his approachable nature beneath the corporate exterior. He inquired about her experiences, the challenges she faced balancing work and family, and the resilience she displayed walking 6 miles through the rain. Hannah spoke candidly, explaining how she had managed her responsibilities with careful planning, determination, and a sense of purpose that extended beyond herself. Ethan listened intently, nodding and occasionally asking thoughtful questions, demonstrating not only interest but a profound respect for her character. The conversation flowed naturally, blending professional topics with personal insights, and the connection between them grew subtly stronger. As they concluded their meeting, Ethan extended a hand in a gesture that was both formal and sincere. "Hannah, I am impressed by your dedication and integrity. We would be honored to have you join our team." Hannah felt a mixture of relief, excitement, and validation, realizing that her efforts had been seen and appreciated at the highest level. She shook his hand firmly, a sense of accomplishment filling her, knowing that the long walk through rain, the relentless preparation, and unwavering commitment to her son had led her to this pivotal moment, and the future suddenly seemed full of possibilities, hope, and new beginnings. The following Monday marked Hannah's first day at the company, and although the skies were clear and the roads were dry, she still felt the same mixture of nervousness and determination that had accompanied her during the storm just days earlier. She arrived early, wanting to make a strong first impression, and spent a few quiet moments in the lobby reviewing the goals she had set for herself. This opportunity meant more than a paycheck. It represented a new chapter for both her and Mason. As she stepped into the office, she was greeted warmly by her new team, who quickly made her feel welcome. Throughout the morning, Hannah absorbed information, learned procedures, and met colleagues from different departments. What surprised her most was the culture of respect that existed throughout the company. People listened to one another. Ideas were encouraged. Hard work was recognized. By lunchtime, some of her anxiety had begun to fade. Several floors above, Ethan reviewed reports in his office, but found himself occasionally wondering how Hannah's first day was going. He reminded himself that she was now an employee like anyone else and deserved the opportunity to succeed on her own merits. Yet he could not deny the admiration he felt for her resilience. Later that afternoon, Hannah received an unexpected message from Ethan's assistant inviting her to a small leadership development meeting. Assuming it was related to onboarding, she accepted. When she entered the conference room, she discovered only a handful of employees had been selected. Ethan himself led the session. Rather than discussing profits or business strategies, he spoke about perseverance, integrity, and the importance of character. Hannah listened carefully. Much of what he described reflected lessons she had learned through personal experience. At one point, Ethan asked everyone to share a challenge they had overcome. The room grew quiet as people reflected. Hannah hesitated before speaking. Then she briefly described balancing motherhood, multiple jobs, and uncertainty while continuing to pursue opportunities for growth. She did not mention the 6-mile walk. She did not seek sympathy. She simply shared her perspective. Ethan watched as the room listened attentively. Her words carried authenticity that could not be taught. After the meeting ended, several colleagues approached her to express admiration for her determination. For the first time in years, Hannah felt genuinely seen for who she was rather than judged by her circumstances. That evening, she returned home carrying a small welcome package from the company. The moment Mason opened the door, excitement spread across his face. "How was your first day?" he asked. Hannah laughed and pulled him into a hug. It was wonderful. They sat together at the kitchen table while she described her new co-workers and the office. Mason listened carefully, clearly proud of her accomplishment. Before bed, he handed her another drawing. This one showed the two of them standing beneath a bright sun instead of dark rain clouds. At the top, he had written, "I knew you could do it." Hannah felt tears gather in her eyes as she looked at the picture. Across town, Ethan sat alone in his office long after most employees had gone home. Through the window, he watched the city lights glow against the evening sky. He thought about Hannah, about the strength she carried so naturally, and about the future she was building. Neither of them realized it yet, but the journey that had begun with a difficult walk through the rain was only the beginning of a connection that would continue to grow in unexpected and meaningful ways. The following week brought a series of new responsibilities for Hannah, and she approached each task with the same quiet determination that had guided her through so many challenges before. She arrived at the office early every morning, ready to absorb information, support her team, and contribute wherever possible. Her colleagues began to notice her dedication and began asking for her input on projects, appreciating both her perspective and her collaborative approach. Meanwhile, Ethan observed Hannah's progress from a distance, impressed by her ability to navigate the office environment with grace and focus. He admired the way she balanced confidence with humility, understanding that true strength often manifested in the smallest gestures of thoughtfulness. One afternoon, a client meeting presented a complex problem, and Hannah volunteered to assist, drawing on her previous experiences and demonstrating critical thinking skills that impressed even the most seasoned members of the team. Ethan, watching from the conference room doorway, noted how naturally she led the discussion without dominating it, creating an environment where ideas flowed freely and solutions emerged through collaboration. Later that day, Hannah returned to her desk and found a note from Ethan encouraging her to keep embracing her talents and to continue pursuing opportunities to grow. She smiled quietly, feeling validated not only for her professional abilities, but also for the resilience and perseverance that had brought her this far. At home, Mason excitedly shared stories from his school day, and Hannah listened intently, appreciating the simple yet profound joy of these moments together. They worked on a school project, Hannah offering guidance while allowing Mason to explore his creativity independently. She realized that the lessons she applied in the office, patience, encouragement, and attentive listening, translated seamlessly into her role as a mother, reinforcing the strength of their bond. Throughout the week, Hannah balanced deadlines, meetings, and personal commitments, demonstrating a remarkable capacity to manage responsibilities with poise and integrity. Ethan, meanwhile, continued to recognize her impact within the company, subtly ensuring she had access to mentorship and resources that would support her professional growth. By the end of the week, Hannah felt a deep sense of accomplishment and quiet pride. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the difficult walk through the rain to this moment of stability and emerging confidence. Mason hugged her tightly before bedtime, whispering that she was the best mom ever, and Hannah felt a wave of gratitude and joy, understanding that every step she had taken had been worth it. Across town, Ethan reviewed the week's achievements, recognizing that Hannah's resilience, intelligence, and authenticity were shaping the company in meaningful ways, and he anticipated the continued unfolding of a story that had begun with determination, courage, and the simplest act of showing up. Nearly a year passed, and the life Hannah once dreamed about slowly became her reality. The uncertainty that had once followed her everywhere was replaced by stability, confidence, and a sense of purpose that extended far beyond her own success. She had become one of the most respected members of her department, earning recognition not because of special treatment, but because of consistent effort, integrity, and an unwavering commitment to excellence. Every achievement reminded her of the rainy morning when she had chosen to keep walking instead of giving up. That single decision had changed everything. One Friday afternoon, the company gathered for its annual employee appreciation event. Colleagues filled the large conference hall, sharing stories, celebrating accomplishments, and reflecting on the growth the organization had experienced throughout the year. Hannah sat near the front beside several teammates who had become close friends. As the event progressed, Ethan stepped onto the stage to deliver the closing remarks. He spoke about leadership, perseverance, and the people who made the company successful. Then his tone became more personal. "A year ago," he began, "I witnessed something that reminded me what determination truly looks like." The room grew quiet. Hannah listened carefully, unaware of where the story was heading. Ethan described seeing someone walking through heavy rain toward an opportunity that could have easily been abandoned. He spoke about resilience, responsibility, and character. Many employees nodded, inspired by the message. Then Ethan looked directly at Hannah. A warm smile appeared on his face. "That person is here today." Surprise filled the room as dozens of eyes turned toward her. Hannah felt her heart race. Ethan continued, "What impressed me was not the distance she walked. It was the fact that she never stopped moving forward." The audience responded with enthusiastic applause. Hannah felt tears gather in her eyes as she stood briefly to acknowledge the recognition. In that moment, she finally learned the truth. Ethan had been the person watching her on that rainy morning. After the event ended, employees gradually departed while conversations lingered throughout the hall. Hannah approached Ethan, still processing the revelation. "You were there that day?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded. "I was." Hannah laughed in disbelief. "And you never told me." "I wanted your work to speak for itself," he replied. "You earned every opportunity through your own effort." For a moment, neither spoke. They simply reflected on how far things had come. Across the room, Mason stood proudly beside a display celebrating employee families. Over the past year, he had watched his mother grow stronger, happier, and more confident. The future that once felt uncertain now seemed bright. As the evening came to an end, the three of them stepped outside together. The sky was clear, filled with stars. Hannah looked upward and smiled. The memory of that difficult walk would always remain with her, not because of the hardship, but because it represented the moment she chose faith over fear. Ethan looked at her and said quietly, "Sometimes the smallest decision changes an entire life."